What if holiness itself became the perfect disguise? What if the faces we call sacred are only masks polished by applause? Masks that gleam so brightly we no longer see the fire burning beneath them. You've felt it, haven't you? That quiet unease in the middle of a sermon that sounds too perfect. The applause that drowns out conviction. The faith that feels rehearsed. Somewhere between devotion and performance, something was lost, and you can't quite name it. But stay here long enough, and you will, because the truth that hides behind this holy mask is not only terrifying, it's familiar. It's the reflection staring back at us when the lights of the sanctuary go dark. They told us that the closer something looks to heaven, the safer it must be. But what if the greatest deception doesn't roar in rebellion, it kneels in reverence? What if hell learned to sing hymns? There is a brilliance so bright that it blinds, a purity so loud it silences the conscience. Bonhoeffer once warned that evil often wears the face of good, not because it wishes to destroy faith, but because it wishes to own it. And perhaps that's the deepest tragedy, that in our hunger to appear righteous, we began serving the very thing we thought we were fighting against. You can sense it, can't you? The counterfeit halo that doesn't glow. It glitters. Every generation builds its own altar, and not all of them point upward. Behind choirs, cameras, and causes, there are unseen hands sculpting idols from sincerity itself. The words remain the same, but their weight changes. The songs still rise, but not always toward heaven. The holy mask is not just a metaphor, it's a mechanism. It is how the heart defends itself from conviction. It's how comfort disguises itself as faith. And somewhere in this exchange between the sacred and the staged, we stopped asking one crucial question: who is all this really for? Because if the answer is not God, then perhaps the mask has already won. And yet, before we tear it off, we must understand it. The mask did not appear overnight. It was born in silence, nourished by compromise and baptized in approval. It does not shout, it whispers. It doesn't deny truth, it decorates it. And every time we traded repentance for recognition, the mask grew thicker until even hell learned to hide behind a hymn. That's why Bonhoeffer's warning still echoes across the decades. When holiness becomes theater, the line between light and darkness fades into illusion. But what if we could see it, truly see it, for what it is? Would we dare remove it, or would we realize that it's already fused to our own skin? It didn't happen overnight. The holy mask was not born in rebellion, but in fear, the fear of being seen as we really are. Over time, faith became a kind of show, and holiness turned into something we performed instead of lived. Men began to measure their devotion not by how deeply they obeyed, but by how loudly they appeared to believe. Churches filled with hands raised high, but hearts grew quiet inside. We built our reputation in the name of God, yet somewhere in the noise, we stopped listening for his whisper. Bonhoeffer warned about this, that when discipleship costs nothing, it means nothing. And now we live in a time where many wear faith like a suit, clean on Sunday, but forgotten by Monday. We wanted comfort more than conviction. We wanted blessings without burden, applause without obedience. Slowly, the line between worship and performance disappeared. The words of Jesus, "If anyone wants to follow me, let him deny himself and carry his cross," became too heavy for modern hearts. So we softened the gospel to make it easier to swallow. We called it relevance, but it was really surrender, not to God, but to convenience. The holy mask became our protection, a way to look strong when our souls were tired. And men, especially older men, learned this skill well, hiding behind work, behind faith, behind silence, until even they could no longer tell where the mask ended and the truth began. Bonhoeffer understood the danger of this comfort. He lived in a world where pretending could cost you your soul. While others preached safety, he preached surrender. He said real grace is costly because it demands your life. And today, that truth sounds old-fashioned, even foolish. But it is the only truth that can save us from the emptiness behind the mask. Because what good is it to build a good image if your heart is starving inside? What good is it to sing about freedom if you still live in chains of pride, fear, and habit? We are not as free as we look. We are prisoners wearing holy clothes, and yet deep down, something in every man knows when his faith has gone quiet. It's that restlessness you feel when the sermon ends and nothing inside you changes. It's that silence in your prayers when you say the same words but feel no fire. That's not failure, it's mercy. It's God knocking on the inside of the mask, reminding you that He wants your truth, not your performance. The holy mask may have protected you once, but now it's suffocating you. And before the end of this journey, you'll have to decide, do you want to keep playing holy or finally become whole? The holy mask didn't stay hidden in the heart. It walked into the church. It took the pulpit, learned the hymns, and began to preach. What once was a private disguise became a public language. We stopped confessing sin and started confessing slogans. We stopped repenting and started branding. Faith turned into something we market, not something we live. Bonhoeffer warned about this long ago, that when Christ is no longer at the center, the church becomes a spiritual corporation. And maybe that's what happened. We turned the cross into a logo, the gospel into a product, and the truth into a sales pitch. The holy mask became the uniform of success. Clean, smiling, confident, but behind it burns a quiet fire that no one dares to name. Behind the stage lights and cameras, there's exhaustion. Behind the polished words, there's emptiness. Men preach strength, but live in fear. They speak of grace, but chase applause. We have learned to decorate our emptiness instead of facing it. It's easier to build bigger churches than to build deeper souls. And as the noise grew louder, conviction grew weaker. The holy mask hides hell, not because it's evil by itself, but because it protects us from seeing what we've become. It keeps us busy, distracted, impressive, anything but honest. And hell doesn't need to destroy a man who can be deceived by his own reflection. The Bible warned us about this long before we called it progress. Jesus looked at the Pharisees, men who seemed holy, men who prayed, men who led, and said, "You are like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside but full of decay inside." That wasn't just for them, it's for us too. For every man who hides behind his reputation, for every pastor who preaches what people want to hear, for every believer who thinks a clean image can hide a cold heart. That's the power of the mask. It doesn't make us wicked, it makes us blind. And blindness is worse than rebellion because the blind man doesn't know he's falling. And so we build temples that look like heaven while living lives that feel like hell. We shake hands, say, "God bless you," and walk away empty. We carry Bibles but not crosses. We call it fellowship, but it's performance. Bonhoeffer saw this happening in his time, the church growing louder while its courage grew smaller. And now we see the same spirit repeating itself in ours. But maybe that's why this moment matters, because the fire behind the mask is spreading again, through pride, through comfort, through indifference. And if we don't face it now, the fire won't just burn behind us, it will burn through us. There's a moment in every man's life when the mask starts to crack. It doesn't happen in public, it happens in the quiet, late hours when the noise fades and the truth begins to whisper. That's when you feel it, the weight of pretending, the pressure of always looking strong, even when your soul is tired. Most men learn early how to hide behind that holy mask, not because they're evil, but because they're afraid of being seen as weak. But Bonhoeffer taught that the heart of faith isn't power, it's surrender. And that truth breaks a man before it rebuilds him. The mask becomes heavy because it carries the burden of two lives, the one others see and the one only God knows. Psychologists call it the divided self, the split between who we are and who we show the world. But Bonhoeffer understood this before the textbooks ever did. He saw how spiritual pride works like a mirror that reflects only what we want to see. You can lie to others for years, even decades, but your soul never stops keeping count. Every time you act holy but feel hollow, a part of you dies. And yet, the mask stays. Because to remove it would mean to face the hell you've been hiding, your regrets, your pride, your failures, your distance from God. But maybe that's what redemption really is. Not escaping hell, but letting God walk with you through it. The tragedy of modern faith is that we've confused peace with numbness. Men say they want God's peace, but what they really seek is escape. We silence guilt with activity, fear with control, and doubt with distractions. The mask helps us look calm, while the fire still burns underneath. Bonhoeffer's voice still echoes through time. When Christ calls a man, he bids him come and die. That death isn't just physical, it's the death of the false self. It's the moment when the mask begins to melt, and what's left is truth. Painful truth, yes, but truth that saves. And yet, something strange happens in that breaking. When the mask finally slips, what you feared losing becomes what sets you free. The anger turns to honesty, the shame becomes confession, the pride begins to crumble, and you start to feel alive again. The holy mask doesn't just hide hell, it hides healing. Because beneath all the pretending, there's still a man who wants to believe again. A man who remembers when faith was real. That's where God begins his work, not in the image we've built, but in the ruin we've avoided. And maybe that's why the fire hasn't destroyed you yet. It's waiting for you to stop hiding and finally let it purify instead of consume. There comes a time when God stops negotiating with the mask, when the polite silence of heaven turns into confrontation. It doesn't come as thunder or lightning, but through something far quieter, the collapse of everything that used to make sense. For many men, it begins with loss, a career that ends, a friend who disappears, a prayer that goes unanswered. In those moments, the mask starts to slip, and what's left beneath it feels unbearable. But Bonhoeffer would say that's grace, severe, but still grace. Because only when everything false falls apart can truth finally enter. The holy mask hides hell by keeping us comfortable, by convincing us we can manage both God and ego. But the collapse exposes what was always there, a faith built on admiration, not obedience. You can't heal what you keep pretending doesn't hurt. The church today is full of smiling men who are bleeding inside, too proud to admit they've lost their fire. They sit through sermons, nod at verses, and go home to a silence that feels like punishment. But what if that silence isn't punishment? What if it's invitation? Bonhoeffer wrote that Christ meets us where we are most ashamed, not where we feel most righteous. And that's the paradox. The very place you've been hiding is the place he's been waiting to enter. The mask keeps your reputation safe, but your soul starving. And the longer you wear it, the harder it becomes to remember what your real face looks like. When the truth finally breaks through, it doesn't ask for perfection, it asks for surrender. That's the hardest thing for men who've spent a lifetime being strong. We were taught to fight battles, to provide, to stand tall. But no one told us that the greatest victory comes through laying it all down. Bonhoeffer understood that following Christ meant standing against the world's definitions of strength. It's not about appearing holy, it's about being honest. It's not about building an image, it's about bearing a cross. And in that act of surrender, when you stop pretending and start confessing, something inside you begins to resurrect. You start to breathe again. You start to see again. And maybe that's the truth we've been running from all along, that the fire behind the holy mask was never meant to destroy us, but to refine us. The same flames that expose hypocrisy also reveal what's still pure. The same light that blinds the proud guides the broken home. Hell hides behind holiness only when we refuse to be healed. But when the mask finally falls, when the man behind it dares to face his own shadow, heaven starts to break through. Bonhoeffer knew that courage, the courage to live unmasked, to obey even when it costs everything. And if you've come this far, maybe you're ready for that courage too. Because this story isn't about judgment. It's about the invitation to become real again. There's a silence that follows truth, not the kind that empties a room, but the kind that fills it with weight. The journey through this mask, this hidden hell, has never been about shame. It's been about sight. About seeing what we once refused to face. Maybe now, as the last words fade, you can feel that quiet recognition inside, the part of you that knows the difference between appearance and authenticity. Bonhoeffer once said that the truth must be spoken even if the world collapses for it, and perhaps that collapse has already begun, not out there, but within. Yet in the ruin, there's a kind of beauty, the kind that only comes when the pretending ends and something real begins to breathe again. We've spent a lifetime trying to polish what was never meant to shine. But God never asked for perfection. He asked for presence. The same fire that burned behind the holy mask now waits to be redeemed. Maybe the hell we feared was never beneath us, but within us, the distance we kept from our own hearts, from the courage to be seen, from the humility to be known. And as you sit here listening, you might realize that the invitation was never to escape the fire, but to walk through it. To let it consume what is false, so that what is true can finally live, because the cost of truth is high, but the reward is peace, the kind no applause can imitate. So when this video ends, don't rush to the next distraction. Sit with what you've felt. Let it linger, let it question you, and if something inside you stirred, that ache, that honesty, that spark, don't bury it again. Speak it, live it. Share it. Let others see the man behind the mask. Subscribe, not to a channel but to truth itself, to a life unmasked, real and brave. Because in a world full of performances, authenticity is the last revolution. And perhaps that's where heaven finally begins, in the courage to be seen as you are.